Hello and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann, also called H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal, also called Q.
And yesterday, we were celebrating a great man in America who also goes by letter initials. Good old MLK. A man after our own hearts.
What a wonderful set of initials MLK has.
Hard to top.
He has the initials. Is like, I find like there's two categories of like how many people like historical that are not authors are basically just, can be readily identified by just their initials. I feel like authors have like R.L. Stine, J.K. Rowling, H.P. Lovecraft, all of these. Happy anniversary / happy birthday, happy day to MLK. Great man, wonderful accomplishments. Died before his time because people have a hard time with change.
And of course, he shares his initials with, you don't often hear the full name of this series, but it is actually Mortal Luther Combat. So
that's true. This is true. And they named it that for obvious reasons. Combat is not the way to solve your problems.
Well, anyways, let's get into some of our own problems today. Try to work them out through very civil means by pitching them into the internet.
Am I first this week?
You are first this week. What do you have for us?
Okay, here's my pitch.
Okay, another good set of initials.
My pitch this week is a potential sequel to Red Faction. It could be a standalone game, but I love the idea of a Red Faction game that plays a little bit like a Borderlands, where you're kind of taking missions from your central base or something, or a central area, and then you're going out and completing those missions for better loot and equipment. But you are using that loot and equipment to dig down and have a very extensive mining operation going at your base in Mars, as you can kind of blow away rock faces, almost Minecraft style. And as you get deeper and deeper and closer to the core, maybe there's some Total Recall mixed into this whole thing. As you get closer to the core, you're discovering more and more maybe threatening creatures and alien life forms, and you're trying to find out the secret at the core of Mars.
All right, well, let's start the clock there then. One of the things that this makes me think of is the first SteamWorld dig, in that the primary thrust of the game is going downwards and burrowing into the earth, but there's still lots of reason to surface and to have adventures on the overworld as well. It was a little shallow, the stuff that you can do above ground, and they kind of I want to say they kind of fixed that in the second game, in that there are other entire areas that you can explore, but they were just kind of like other alternatives to going deeper underground. And but if we have a game where the primary thrust is to go downwards, but there's still kind of a full game's worth of content to experience on the surface as well, that's kind of cool. It gives you a couple of ways to spend your time and to divert your attention. And I like this idea of a game where if you don't feel like, this is the thing that I love about Spider-Man on PS4 in particular, is like if you don't feel like engaging with the main story content, there's still plenty to do to make you feel productive in the time that you're spending with it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that struck me, and I would like to see more out of game design, is we have a lot of these kind of open world or hub and spoke style shooter / RPG kind of games. That's all good fun, but I also think that they're handling their skill upgrades and stuff a lot through just UI and menu systems. And UI and menu systems never feel like a game to me. And so if you could visualize developing the base and digging underground in that sort of non-linear way, you could handle that the way that you like gain upgrades and gain power for the character. Maybe your mining team is able to discover crystals or something. Maybe you have workers, maybe it's just you, and you're splitting your time. But that's kind of how you're handling a physicality to the skill tree. And then on the other times, you're like going out and testing your newfound powers out in the field by accomplishing missions and maybe getting more sophisticated digging equipment or being able to afford that suit that will take even more pressure, all that kind of cool stuff.
So I'm going to again circle back to one of the early pitches that we made, which was a crossover between The Legend of Zelda and Dark Souls in a way, where you play and you're trying to save Hyrule, but every time you die, you are sent back to Termina from Majora's Mask. And essentially, you're supposed to kind of spend the first half of the game going through Termina and powering up because Hyrule is way over your head. And every once in a while, if you feel confident, then you can poke your head up there and, revive yourself and take whatever kind of run you can to try to score some really great loot that would benefit your adventures in Termina. But, it's difficult. Death comes quickly and easily, and you are sent back down below. And so this is an interesting idea of splitting your attention between these two different planes, these two different modes of progression. I think it would be most interesting to have players going back and forth frequently throughout the game and kind of unlocking things in both areas as they go. What is to prevent people from just spending all their time digging? And even if it's slow, even if you get shovel upgrades or something up above, but you're still able to kind of power through and unlock all the great weapons and then just kind of breeze through the overworld.
Well, I'm going to reference another game that's kind of just about exploration and digging, and one of my favorite games, Astroneer here, where one of the ways that they've designed the planet, there's a great sort of behind the scenes video, and they sliced a planet in half in it, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's quite something.
And so they had this planet, and they had it cut in half, and they showed that there were kind of set rings, and I think you could think of the rings as either levels of creature spawns, or they require certain tools to navigate, and then you almost create the sort of Metroidvania feeling of progress down one route to be able to unlock something that will push the other route forward. So you would really have to find this sort of beautiful rhythm of about 3 hours into your top world adventure, you're going to hit a point where you've reached critical mass, or the enemies are not really quite scaled with you, and then to each some marquee thing that happens underground kind of powers up the level of the surface world, and that's how you can make progress. I know it's a little old-fashioned to think of bleeding the experience strip away from people. Maybe there's a more satisfying way to do it, but yeah, you would have to kind of make one feed the other.
Okay, so let's think about so the underground, burrowing underground. I kind of like this Minecraft setup where you're carving away tunnels. You don't necessarily have a sense of direction or where to go, but every once in a while you open up and you kind of punch through the walls and find this enormous cavern around you, maybe kind of prompted by sound cues that you can hear through the walls as they start to get thin. What would be the ideal way of keeping just kind of burrowing into the earth interesting on a moment-to-moment level?
That's a good question. Before I answer that thought, I had the second thought that I want to express, which is maybe one of the things that you earn consistently from your sort of Mad Maxian surface adventure is fuel, right? And so you have a giant mining drill that's at the center that requires a constant source of fuel. So you find yourself naturally developing into a loop of going out, getting some critical mass of fuel, then bringing it back to the base and fueling up your drill. And as you drill further and further, you're finding things like your fuel capacity can be higher and your, weapons can be stronger and all of that sort of stuff. So you could maybe use fuel as a trigger there. But your original question was, sorry, could you restate the question?
If you are just kind of burrowing tunnels, obviously you'd open up into these larger caverns and larger rooms, but you could spend a very long time just kind of making straight tunnels. How do you keep that interesting?
One of the things I like about Astroneer and I like about Minecraft is depending on where you start digging, you kind of will see sometimes a little piece or deposit of a resource exposed. So I like the idea of maybe the different types of resources necessary to upgrade different things, whether it be weaponry, armor, all this sort of stuff. Your weaponry, armor, shields, we'll say that. To do that, you want to explore wide as well as deep. So really you maximize the exploration and the gathering of the resources with the width, but then you progress the game forward with the depth.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm a little bit worried about is so much of Red Faction, if this is indeed tied to Red Faction, is about the sort of freedom to smash through anything, and you would have to place some logical limits on that. You couldn't just say, I know our Red Faction historically, based on technology, has kind of had to place more arbitrary limits on it, but finding the right balance of how far somebody's allowed to kind of explore on their own, maybe it's a width thing, and then depth requires some other tool access or something.
If you are able to kind of, if you have a 3D planet that's all a part of this game world, letting them take whatever route they want through the planet and explore as deep and wide as they want and uncovering secret rooms and stuff like that sounds like a lot of fun. I would want it to be more player directed than a kind of linear tunnel that you're following.
Yeah, especially if you could have your Dead Cell-y / Borderlands-y when you come across a particular cavern that you've dug yourself and you find a high-level creature that could be worth a substantial amount of resources or experience. That would feel pretty rewarding.
Yeah. Well, let's close that one down and let's come up with a name. So if this is in the Red Faction series, then I would suggest Red Faction Redemption.
Man, I was gonna say Red Faction Underground, because we had sort of a Red Faction Guerrilla and we had Red Faction Armageddon. But this
would play nicely into, you get the underglow on your big drill tank. Some Crystal Method and Snoop Dogg songs playing.
That's right. I'm gonna take your girl and I'm gonna take your ride. No, let's get that SEO bump, H, and let's go for Red Faction Redemption.
All right, well, let's move over to my pitch then. I'm not 100% confident we haven't pitched this before, but let's see what happens. So what I'm thinking is I have this envision in my head as a skateboarding type game, but I'm not married to that idea. I think it's adaptable and it can be transformed into anything, really. So essentially you're kind of skateboarding in a blank void, almost like that Daffy Duck cartoon where he's just kind of in the big white space. And as you skateboard around, based on the jumps, or maybe you have three-dimensional control through this void, it is kind of painting a line behind you of rails that you can grind and ramps to go down and things to jump over, and it kind of reacts to everything that you naturally do, and then you can challenge somebody else to recreate your line since it is kind of painted out behind you. Others can load it as a stage and try to reproduce your actions. So let's see what we can do with that.
Cool. So the point of the game is to sort of is tricking a part of painting the line, or you're just kind of, as you move, the line is painted and you are constantly sort of drawing challenges and creating challenges, and you must have to at some point participate or attempt somebody else's challenge. I'm trying to think of the inventory of users versus creators.
Yeah, essentially, you would be, I guess, anytime you jump, it would kind of create a bottomless pit under where you jumped over. This could also work as a platformer type stage, almost there's a few games that do kind of a play a game in reverse type thing where, as you move backwards through the game, every time you press the fire button, you're actually recalling a bullet back into your character. And every time that you have to press the jump button to land correctly after, because everything is in reverse. Every reaction precedes the action that spawned it. And so, in a way, everything that you've done is represented in the course as it is drawn out, and it's kind of up to other people to try to follow it.
One of the things I like about this is it actually has vibes of Mario Maker to me, in a way, because I find myself saying this is going to, like, what if once you sort of paint down your track or you want to submit your track, you have to manage to, like, complete it yourself. You have to be able to retrace your own steps before you're expected to have somebody else do the same.
Yeah, the only things that I'm not really loving about the idea right now is kind of two things. One, I think with such a limited tool set, it doesn't really encourage that much creativity, and I don't know how much diversity you would really see between courses. And two, I would think that the easiest way to trip up a challenger would be to just do like a kind of random and frantic assortment of tricks that are difficult to kind of see coming and predict and react to in real time when they're playing it back. So all of these things kind of seem to conspire against creating anything actually interesting.
Potentially. Let me ask you this. What if it was less about tricking and kind of assembling the craziest, weirdest thing, and you shifted it to be a little bit more like two people playing simultaneously? Maybe there's some delay built in or something like that, but you're kind of asking player two to mirror move the first player.
Okay. I mean, yeah, you could be like a virtual, like, Groucho Marx in the mirror type situation. That's interesting. It seems very difficult, unless it would be forgiving enough with the timing to basically render the challenge non-existent. I'm not really sure. It's difficult. Maybe it's like a car racing thing where you're driving through the woods and cutting down trees as you go, and then the lap that you made ends up turning into a race course that everyone can drive on. But I don't know. I'm just not quite there yet. I don't know what to make of this.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break down the mechanics. I think the first mechanic is cool, where you're skateboarding potentially and you're drawing a path behind you. So we'll start there. What are the things that we can do with the path? We can potentially have it be a platform itself, so you can use it as a platformer to jump on or something. We could take it and make it sort of the requirement for the next person. So that kind of is like do as I do. But it seems like the do as I do stuff ends up not resonating for you. Is that correct?
Well, it just seems like player one is rewarded for beating player two, then they would try to create such a crazy assortment of tricks that are difficult to, if they're just kind of randomly flicking their thumbs around, that doesn't necessarily require a lot of like thought ahead of time.
Right.
And then player two would just kind of be bombarded with data that they can't really parse out. Maybe there are preset courses and player one makes a run through there, and there's kind of a golden line left behind, and you get extra points for however long you're able to stay in that line. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
It's kind of like in those ways, like the Spider-Man missions where you're trailing behind the drones and you have to fly through the rings to try to, but you're not necessarily penalized for not flying through the rings, it's just you don't get the extra points.
I wonder if you could mix in the score as a second gate, right? So you are both trying to hit the jumps and follow the line, and you almost get like in a Forza or something, there's more credit, or there's kind of more to be gained by following the exact line of the other person. But then every time there is a jump or there is something, you have to hit a minimum point threshold set by the other person to get to it. So if they're repeating the same tricks, like we'll say Tony Hawk rules, if they're repeating the same tricks and doing the same things over these things, they're going to have diminishing points over the course of this thing. Mm-hmm. So it kind of not only requires them to, like, you would almost get more conservative with your line if you knew that you had to hit certain tricks going into certain jumps or something like that. So now you're like, okay, well, he had 100 points off of this jump. If you don't have 100 by the end, like, you're toast. So you have to hit that threshold along with kind of mirroring. You get the bonus points for the mirror.
How about this? What if we change things up a little bit and instead of skateboarding, we make this like a parkour type game, and it's set in this big open world city where, almost like Mirror's Edge, except not necessarily set on the rooftops. You can always climb up to the rooftops, but you're primarily on the ground, just like you would be on a Tony Hawk game, and trying to find interesting lines. Maybe you are kind of as nimble in an unrealistic way as Mario, able to wall jump and run on walls for a period of time. You can kind of Prince of Persia your way around, and you can set trails, or maybe almost like in Dark Souls, there are trails left by other players that kind of phase in and out of your world, and as you follow the trails and as you do tricks on those, then you get multipliers of your score. But essentially, you're just trying to perform challenges in this world or find cool spots or gap between objects or something in a parkour type space. So kind of like a Tony Hawk, but with more, control over stopping and turning.
I know we're coming up against time, but I wanted to say that this really makes me inspired to see a game that is the sort of like opening of Casino Royale or whatever, which is like spy chase down parkour criminal. It's like a 2-player game where parkour criminal gets a head start, and you could play different characters. Some can like bust through certain objects, but certain ones have different jump height and all this kind of stuff. But if they're balanced enough, having 2 different characters and you can't have the same character could be a really fun, almost like physical parkour racing game.
Yeah, like Crackdown, but with a little bit more kind of forward momentum. Always in place.
And the ability to just, die from a fall. I think that's something that could be really cool if you place it in like an aesthetic that looks like an Ubisoft Watch Dogs or something. It would be rad.
Yeah, that's interesting. You can have this, kind of a realistic, grounded feeling world. You can essentially be like a cop movie chase. Maybe you could start in cars, and then as players, ditch out of the cars, you can have just like a Need for Speed with the police and the criminals running away, and then get out of the car and run up a building and try to run and hide in another building. I like that a lot.
Man,
there's this really cool mode in Watch Dogs 1 and 2, I think, where you can break into somebody else's world, hack some of their stuff, and then they have to come and find you before your hack is complete. And it's your job to just kind of like lay low and blend into the environment. And so maybe that is like the escape condition, is that, the pursuing player just can't find you anymore. Maybe they arrest the wrong person or something. So you get a little bit of Spy Party in there as well.
Yeah. Yep. Man, this really transformed into one of my favorite games I think we've ever pitched. Ubisoft, call us. Let's make this game.
All right, well, that's time for us. It did take quite a journey. So you said before, and I kind of liked that phrase, parkour criminal. I think it has kind of a fun late 90s feeling to it.
It really does, yeah. It sounds like it belongs on the 3DO or something.
Cool. Well, let's go to the community and see what they have to say. All right. This comes from Nathan Norman, who says, "Hey guys, I'm emailing from all the way down under. First time, long time. I'm a huge Fallout fan. And with the unfortunate performance of Fallout 76, I personally still dig it. My pitch to you is if you could do an offshoot Fallout game, Fallout Shelter, Fallout 76, what would you do with it? Personally, I'd love a Fallout game similar to 1 and 2, which is top-down, turn-based RPG, but with upgraded mechanics and graphics. What would you guys do?" They're open-ended one. Let's count this down and start the clock.
First, a sequel to Half-Life, then a good Fallout sequel. We're getting the easy ones. Wow. Okay, well, Nathan, thank you so much for writing in. To me, the Fallout games have started to, or they've gone very far in the direction of sort of fetishizing nuclear war in a way, and I don't feel the fear of what nuclear war means in that world anymore. You're kind of like trudging through a wasteland, but everybody's happy. Your robot's making jokes. You gotta die. Like everything is kind of chill in the way that when I think of even the name Fallout is grim, and I would love to see a Fallout game that is set in a very contemplative, sort of sad feeling thing that is, I don't know if it's just like, if it's Fallout stories or something, and it ends up being vignettes of a combination of people's life before the Fallout and after the Fallout, and like finding out what happened to them.
I think one of the things that I like about the Fallout series, and I'm guilty of speaking poorly of the series in the past. I'm not going to shy away from that necessarily, but I do like the kind of sense of humor, and I like that the post-apocalypse
I just said the opposite.
I know.
Just kidding.
But it's interesting. There's two sides to every coin. So
yeah.
The setting, just kind of this ruined wasteland where people are kind of building anew, basically just resetting society. It's kind of an interesting premise. I think there's room for both, whether you want to focus on the horrors of the war or whether you want to take the kind of wackier route. I think the Fallout series has always balanced those two things very well, especially in like Fallout New Vegas. I think had a lot of really goofy quests that you can almost like, the entire world, now that there is no structure to society any longer, is kind of like, the kids are home alone when the parents are out. Like there's nobody watching over anything. And so sometimes it's chaos. Sometimes they're living out their wildest fantasies, and sometimes it's a mixture of the two.
I would like to see a Fallout sequel maybe deal with the sort of classic post-apocalypse promise, or even the promise of a dystopian sci-fi genre film where there is a place that was relatively unaffected by the fallout, and you're playing as a character who is desperately trying to get there. And then maybe, you get there and you have like the second half of the game or the last third of the game take place in this really like lush, almost alien looking world because of all the mutations and stuff. And you really start to like build out the palette that I think the Bethesda games have kind of played with now for a while, where, okay, I could probably name like half the enemies inside of a Fallout game of like, I guess they did some androids now, but we have like rad roaches, and we get the rats, and we have the mutants and the death claws, right? Exactly. So I think Fallout needs to start going to new places and seeing new ways. And there's so much like science and reference material and lots of projections and books and to study that could show the effects of what like nuclear war would do. And, it could turn, Antarctica into something of a paradise, depending on what it does to the environment, or maybe a Fallout that's entirely dedicated to like the person trying to build a makeshift spaceship or something.
So I think we're focusing a lot on the aesthetics and the story, which is good. Obviously, there's that kind of groundwork needs to be laid. But I think that the challenge that we were presented was, let's come up with a different type of game that we would set in that universe. So taking the mold of Fallout as it is right now, what other kind of genres, and let's think about things that are like way out of left field could we experiment with that could tell an interesting post-apocalyptic story. Maybe you're trying to rebuild, not entire society. You're not necessarily playing SimCity, but you're trying to rebuild civility within society and trying to build a justice system. Maybe you're playing as a lawyer in a post-apocalyptic world, or trying to play a leader of a clan solving disputes or something like that. I don't know. Just keep throwing ideas and we'll find one that really stands out to us.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I like the idea of I guess, almost a Phoenix Wright for the Fallout universe, trying to dispatch justice.
Like Phoenix rising from the ashes.
Oh, there we go. Phoenix rising, Fallout rising. Wait, we've done it. I like the idea too of potentially doing an RTS in the series. So that would return you to the perspective that you might have gotten in the first and second Fallout. So you have this like very familiar look to it, but really you, like, each person is owning a vault and like churning out units from that vault and upgrading the vault and all that sort of stuff. And maybe you could find cool ways to make that like persistent or not. But yeah, I think you could, obviously the two popular PC genres of RTS and maybe potentially, I don't know quite what they would do with a Fallout MOBA, but that could be fun and weird as well.
Or you can do a Fallout cooking game where you're trying to experiment with the various creatures that populate the world now and try to find the recipes that suit your population.
Oh man, yes. Yeah, I actually think we pitched something similar to that before, like the post-apocalyptic diner that you have to manage.
Oh, yeah, that does sound familiar.
What is like first person adjacent but not a shooter? Like is there a Witness for the Fallout universe? Is there a Gone Home for Fallout?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe, man, this is really like tonally different than anything Fallout. But maybe you're playing as almost like the angel of death in the moment of the blast of the bomb. And so essentially kind of like the Witness, you are walking through a moment frozen in time in this city or in this entire kind of countryside. And you're trying to basically, claim the souls of the people that live there, almost like a Mount Vesuvius, Pompeii situation where everyone is kind of frozen in time and every person is a puzzle. And so as you travel through the land and as you are kind of claiming, it's very grim, it's be kind of difficult to launch at any point in time because it would be always too soon to relative to something. But you're trying to solve these intricate puzzles that are embedded in the environment as you are kind of claiming victims from the nuclear blast. That's nice and happy.
Well, what I like about that is it could do a lot of different flavors and types of storytelling. So almost returning to that idea of vignettes or whatever, you're going to have people who you are claiming their soul, or you're kind of piecing together how to claim their soul in very funny and comical ways. And then you could have some that are much sadder and like kind of question that. I also wonder if there's a Fallout game that is something about taking command or being the person that pushes the button that like starts the whole thing. Fallout 76 was supposed to be the first vault and going the farthest back we've ever gone in the Fallout timeline or whatever. But like the real beginning of the Fallout timeline is the bombs falling. And so what is maybe a Fallout game that is a true prequel and just leads up to that moment could be cool.
It'd be interesting to kind of get some more time in the world beforehand and really see, what caused that to happen. And anyways, we've exhausted all the time that we have to talk about this. I don't know if we came up with an idea, but
we came up with 50 sequels to Fallout. We've done it.
I think an appropriate title for this would be Fallout 76 Games in One. Like one of those NES cartridges, those old bootleg ones.
Mm-hmm. And like 40 of them are Tetris.
and 20 of them are like weird erotic things that's like, I don't know if I really like this.
I don't think my mom knew what was going to be.
I thought this was for kids. Anyways, that was submitted from Nathan Norman Down Under. Thank you very much for submitting that. Very cool to have these international pitches from all over the world. It's very exciting. I hope that, sorry that we weren't able to deliver anything more substantial and concrete, but I hope that it gave you lots to think about as you ponder the future of Fallout.
Nathan, if you write back and tell us, number one, who had the idea that you like the most. Number 2, who's the best host on the show, then we will read your response out loud at the beginning of the show. This I promise you.
Let's stoke up some nice friendly competition between the hosts.
Well, we're already divorced now, H. I mean, I'm letting it all fly.
If you would like to submit a game of your own, an idea that you would like to see turned into a wild and wacky video game, then you can do so by pitching to playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can email us, playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise.
And Q, why don't you take us out with a miniature pitch?
So my miniature pitch this week is an adventure game where you're running around solving puzzles, but at any moment you could transform into a werewolf.
That's not bad, actually. Cool. Well, closing it down. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you for listening.
We'll see you next week.